Why, hello there. You know how I like to make these documentary videos. Oh, by the way, just to let you know, in case you see all these trees behind us, we recently got hit with a nor'easter yesterday, which I posted the video right here. But we're not going to get into that in detail, but it's going to be relevant in the video and you're going to see why. So, in case you don't know, it is the year 2018. A lot of stuff happened in 2018, like World War II ending and the Spanish flu, which we'll actually get into the next video. But I decided to do something a little bit more local. After researching a new short film, I came across something that was pretty interesting that I think that no person in the town knows about, unless they've been here for the past 3 generations. So let's get on with that, and it's going to be really troubling. Oh, by the way, in case you don't know, there's also a cemetery right behind us, which will also be relevant in the video, and you're going to see why. And it's quite windy today. Almost paranoia. Let's get on with the video. So let's set the scene up. It is the 1950s, just 10 years after World War II ended. The United States is prospering. It is truly a time of innovation. The whole country is turning into an urban city. The future seems bright. Everything is slowly transitioning into what we know as the world today. No more agricultural farms, instead peaceful suburbs. Or so peaceful as everyone thought, which you're about to see coming up. In this episode, we're going to be talking about a murder that happened right here in our own town. So, let's meet the people. Born on February 8th, 1934, we have a picture of the young Edgar Smith, who lived in Ramsey. You would not associate him as the typical person. Instead, you associate him more as like the 50s jock, which is portrayed in a lot of superhero comics, if you're going to compare him to that. At the time of this incident, he was at the age of 23 years old. He had a wife and was also an ex-Marine at this time. Next up, we have Victoria Ann Zielinski, born on September 6, 1941. At the time of the murder, she was only 15 years old. As a sophomore in Ramsey High School, she achieved the honor roll and also enjoyed a place on the cheerleader squad. She was known to be very bright and liked by all of her peers. So now that we know where this is going to be taking place, now we're going to see where exactly this is going to take place. Now this map over here is over 6 years newer, and there's a lot of streets and corners that are very confusing, so we're going to use this map instead. As you can see, the only main streets that are recognizable are Fardale and Chapel and Pullis and Wyckoff Avenues. So we're going to be using this old map. But just for reference, here's the other new map again, and the locations that are going to be important is Wyckoff Ave and Fardale Avenue, as well as Chapel, because those are the main streets that we're going to have to be involved. So the date is March 4th, 1957, exactly 61 years ago. Although there's many new streets here because this is the 2017 map version, we're going to be imagining it as the 1957 map that we've referenced before. This is mostly where everything's going to show down. Citing one of the witnesses' testimony, at approximately 7:30 that evening, at Victoria's request, Myrna had walked her sister part of the way home for Barbara Nixon, Victoria's best friend. The houses were situated approximately 4/5 of a mile apart from Wyckoff Avenue in Ramsey, borough at the township of Marwa representatively. At 7:40, approximately 2/3 of a mile south of the Zielinski home in the direction of Marwa, Myrna testified that she last saw her sister when Victoria had continued walking the route to the Nixon home by herself and Myrna had returned home. Victoria had planned to only have a short visit at Barbara Nixon's residence so that the two girls could exchange notes and study for an upcoming bookkeeping exam at Ramsey High School. And because the girl said she felt uneasy about walking in the dark road by herself, Myra Zielinski agreed to walk back in the direction of the Nixon home in order to meet Victoria and the walk part of the way home with her. The two had prearranged to leave their standing points at 8:30 p.m. When Myrna left her home a bit late at around 8:40 p.m., she walked the entire route to the Nixon house at an accelerated pace without encountering Victoria, who would logically have been waiting in a northerly direction towards her on Wyckoff Avenue, which was virtually the only route between the two houses at the time. Myrna testified that she had arrived at the Nixon home and been told that Victoria had left for the home about 10 minutes earlier. In fact, the Nixon home sat on the northwest corner of Wyckoff and Fardale Avenues, approximately 4/5 of a mile from the Zayinsky dwelling, also located on Wyckoff Avenue. On the evening of March 4th, 1957, Victoria's walk home from a friend's house was along a 2-lane blacktop roadway called Wyckoff Avenue. Wyckoff Avenue extended a few miles in a southerly direction on the town of Wyckoff, and after passing the Zayinsky home, continued in a northern direction to the business section of the town of Ramsey, New Jersey, where Main Street is located. This particular stretch of road in 1957 was residential, bordering on rural and heavily wooded on both sides in between sparsely placed homes. Victoria Zayinsky had prearranged to meet her 13-year-old sister at a point around halfway between the Nixon and Zayinsky homes, adjacent to the West Crescent Avenue. In 1957, West Crescent Avenue intersected Wyckoff at the border between Mara Township and Ramsey Borough. Initially, it was at this intersection that Wyckoff Avenue became lit with streets and the sidewalk was provided for pedestrians. Up to that very juncture, Victoria would have walked on a very dark road, and virtually in the road. Citing a Supreme Court hearing on the current events, on the morning of March 4th, 1957, Edgar Smith was laid off his job. He spent most of the afternoon at a bowling alley in Paramus and left for his trailer home at around 6:30 p.m. that day, with Gilroy and Rockefeller, his two friends. He borrowed Gilroy's car, which was a Mercury, and drove to a gas station where he purchased 5 gallons of kerosene. He returned home shortly before 8 o'clock p.m. and tried to light off his heater but was unsuccessful. He decided that he needed more kerosene. Before he drove off, his wife returned from the doctors accompanied by her mother. Smith informed them of his errand and left. He bought 5 more gallons of kerosene at the Ramsey service station and started to return home via Wyckoff Avenue at around 8:30 p.m. Near Fardale Avenue in Mawa, he saw Victoria Zayinsky, whom he knew casually from meeting her in town, in quotes, walking along the street. He was proceeding in the opposite direction and was going to pass her by, but she yelled or motioned him for him to stop. He turned around and came back, and she requested a ride for her home. Smith had driven her home on several previous occasions, and he agreed. The time was approximately 8:35 p.m. Shortly before they reached the Zayinsky residence, Victoria told Smith that her sister was walking to meet her and that she did not want Myrna to see her in the car with him because, in quotes, she was in trouble with her family. She asked him to drive around the block. He complied, turning off Wyckoff Avenue onto West Crescent Avenue, the last street before her house. When they arrived at the sand pit off Chapel Road, that 444 near Fardale, he turned on his own accord. Defendant and the victim sat in the car and talked as Smith smoked a cigarette. Victoria told him she was having difficulty with her family over cutting school and that they had found out about a false note that she had prepared and sent to the school under her mother's name. Suddenly, and according to Smith for no apparent reason, she said, "I'm going to get out of there and walk home. I'm going to tell my father. I'm going to go home and tell him you are like the rest of the guys." She started to leave the car. Smith, feeling he was responsible for seeing her home, reached across the seat and grabbed her arm. She struggled and got part of the way out of the car as he worked his way across to the passenger side of the front seat. When he tried to follow her out, she, in quotes, started yelling something and, in quotes, swinging at me at sort of slapping. He swung in her direction and with his right arm, a fist or a slap, but could not remember whether or not he hit her. "The next thing I actually realized was getting back into the car," he claims. Citing the prosecution's evidence, Smith had chased the girl several hundred yards, hit her with a baseball bat that he obtained from the Mercury car, at which point the victim lost one of her penny loafers and a large hank of her hair as well as a headscarf that she was wearing. And then he dragged her, either stunned or struggling, back in the sandpit from which she had fled him seconds earlier, even pausing at one point to discard the bloody baseball bat in a wooded area near the intersection of Chapel Road and Fardale Avenue. After dragging the victim up on top of the mound of earth, Smith used one or more large boulders to murder the girl, crushing her skull before pitching her lifeless body down several feet into the field at the foot of the banked area. Evidence showed later that 2 boulders were involved in the murder, and the friend's baseball bat was later located several hundred feet above the sandpit mound. By this point, Victoria is dead. You might not see this on camera, but right over here, there's an area. It's an area that's known to have a lot of gravel. Right over here. The next morning, A snowstorm hit. It was below 0 degrees, and the night before, the parents of Victoria Zielinski were desperately looking for their daughter after she did not come home. At around 9 o'clock in the morning, the parents found one of the girl's shoes, a black penny loafer. They were trying to look at an approximately 2-mile radius from where their daughter might have been seen, searching for her. They also noticed a blood-matted headscarf in the vicinity. While Mr. Zielinski, the girl's father, continued searching on foot, Mrs. Zielinski contacted the police. Mr. Zielinski, after observing a pair of gloves lying in the dirt of a sand pit, located a few hundred yards from where the shoe was found, returned to his wife, and together they waited for the police. This field wasn't a field back then. Instead, it was just open space. The school was not here. The house was not here. This basketball court was not here. Or tennis court, that's the basketball court. And all of that area, that whole entire street, Feldman Court, was not here. This gravel area, this area used to be only gravel. It still kinda is. They've been led right over where that house was. This is where this exact pole was. And they found something peculiar. The police arrived a short time later, and while Mrs. Zielinski stayed with the car, Mr. Zielinski, together with the Mob Police Department's Captain Ed Wickham, resumed the search for Victoria. A couple of hundred feet from where the Zielinski's car was stopped, close to where the loafer and scarf were found, beyond the point where Fardale Avenue and Chapel Road intersect, there was a short dirt road leading to a gravel pit area. The two men noticed fresh tire tracks in the dirt of the road as the search continued. Beyond the road's end, a large mound of excavated earth was bulldozed into a 6 to 7 foot mound that formed a bank. Victoria Ann Zielinski's body was discovered on the north side of the bank, which obstructed a view for battered remains of passing traffic along with 2 intersecting streets nearby. The body lay face up in what Mr. Zielinski later described under oath as a jackknife position. The legs crossed over the torso so her feet and the upper body were both parallel with the top of the dirt mound. Victoria's face had been destroyed. Where the teen's face had been, there remained an unrecognizable bloody area, so unrecognizable that Mr. Zielinski later testified that he discovered her body, his daughter with his face lying down. The county coroner later reported that most of Victoria's hair was missing along with the back of her skull. Her right eye was destroyed, her nose and cheekbones had multiple fractures, and most of her teeth were loose with the remains of her mouth. From the neck down, the body had one notable injury, a bruise on the right breast, later determined by the county coroner to be consistent with teeth marks from a human bite wound. Her dungarees remained intact, fastened with a wide black leather belt. There were some deep scratches on her lower back, just above the belt, clearly visible in the photographic evidence of record. Her Ramsey High School jacket lay adjacent to her body. Her sweater appeared to be pulled up around the area of her neck, and her brazier pulled down near her waist. One strap of the brazier was broken. The body had one thick white sock barely touching her foot. The other foot was bare. Her skull had been smashed by repeated blows with 2 large rocks which were found stained with blood and human tissue in the vicinity of the girl's body. In addition, her brains were scattered from 7 to 8 feet along the bank. According to Mr. Zielinski's testimony, that there was a scuffled area near the southern base of the mound where the weeds and brush appear to have been recently disturbed. Above the area towards the mountain's top, the victim's heart-shaped silver locket, loafer, blood-matted hair, and the 2 large boulders covered in type O blood, Victoria's blood type, were found within an approximate 12-foot radius. The family was shocked. They were heartbroken, and it drastically affected the whole entire community. They were wondering who could have possibly done this. Soon after the discovery, the report came on the radio saying that there was a murder in the area and that they're searching every single car and piece of evidence that they can find. They soon found out that one of the witnesses said that there was a Mercury driving over there at around the time of the murder. So, cops searched for that Mercury. On the night of the murder, 23-year-old Edgar Smith borrowed a friend's car, and his later activities arose suspicion, including Smith excusing himself from meeting the same friend in a bar early in the evening, and his statement about having to remove his trousers, claiming he had been sick of them. When the murder was reported the following day on the radio, 2 of Smith's friends, one of them owned the vehicle Smith had borrowed the evening before, joked with him saying that the murderer's car reported to be the same make and model as the one Smith had driven the previous evening, and that the police were checking all the Mercury vehicles in Bergen County. One of the friends later testified that Smith got a startled look on his face. A day later, on March 6, 1957, a drop of blood was found on the driver's side of the car by the vehicle's owner, and Smith was brought in for questioning by the police. Smith at the time was an unemployed mechanic. He stated that he knew both Victoria Zienski and her 18-year-old sister, Mary, and that he had given Victoria rides home several times in the months preceding the murder without incident. During questioning, Smith repeatedly could not account for a half-hour gap during the night of the murder. He was also unable to account for his missing pants, for which the police later located, heavily stained with type O blood. Smith's own blood was type A, while Victoria Zienski's was type O. The pair of pants were identified as belonging to Smith by his wife. Faced with this evidence during questioning, Smith reportedly blurted out that Victoria had hit him in the face. He informed the police that he had picked Victoria up in his car, then attempted to grab her when she exited the vehicle which he had parked in the sandpit. Her attempt to leave had angered him. Smith was arrested for the murder and faced 3 psychiatric examinations before his trial. He is now a killer. We're not going to mention the trial that much, but we're only going to tackle the most important points during it. Firstly, the 1950 light blue Mercury convertible that belonged to a friend had been impounded and was used during the investigation. During the trial, Edgar Smith became infamous and was known as a local celebrity around the nation. Not too long after the testimonies, Smith was found guilty by the jury after 2.5 hours of deliberation. Now this is where it gets a little strange. Smith was sent to death row at New Jersey State Prison, where he spent 14 years, at the time the longest time a prisoner has been on death row. In 1962, his wife left him, and in 1964, he was forced to become his own lawyer because of his financial situation. He attacked Harmel's statement and maintained that his own comments were inadmissible because he had not signed anything. He also examined the medical report, which had found estimating Vicky's time of death difficult. Smith's appeals, however, were repeatedly dismissed, but his death sentence was postponed on several occasions. In 1962, Smith began correspondence with the Republican William F. Buckley, Jr., the founder of National Review, during which Buckley began to doubt Smith's guilt, later stating that the case was inerrantly implausible. An article by Buckley in November 1965, published in Esquire, drew national media attention. In quotes, Smith had told me Rommel during the brief conversation on the night of the murder just where he had discarded his pants. The woman whom occupies property across the road from which Smith claimed to have thrown the pants swore at the trial that she had seen Rommel rummaging there the day after the murder. The pants were later found by the police near the well-traveled road. Did Rommel find them and leave them in the other location, thinking to discredit Smith's story and make sure they were turned up? This brought renewed media interest in Rommel, scrutiny which was increased still further with the publishing of Smith's book, Brief Against Death, in 1968. In 1971, Smith was successful in his 19th appeal against the fair nature of his trial, claiming that his confession was obtained under duress. As the confession was obtained 8 years prior to the introduction of Miranda rights, Smith's appeal carried some weight. In 1971, Smith was able to have a repeat trial, and in June of that year, Smith's confession was ruled to have been obtained unfairly and unconstitutionally, and Smith was offered parole if he accepted a charge of second-degree murder under a deal approved by Judge Morris Pashman, an offer which he accepted. On December 6, 1971, he pled guilty to second-degree murder, and he was released from prison at the age of 37. Smith went on to lecture a number of colleges and universities, as well as making several television and radio appearances. He published a third book, Getting Out, and argued for penal reform. However, as his celebrity status declined, Smith began drinking heavily and got himself into more debt. This was him an hour and 30 minutes after he was released from prison.
Our guest tonight is Edgar Smith. He was discharged an hour and a half ago from the death house at Trenton, New Jersey, to which he was sent with orders that he be executed in May of 1957. He was in the death house longer than anyone in the history of the United States. What happened between May 1957 and this afternoon is the subject of interest for lawyers, criminologists, jurists, and human beings. Edgar Smith went to the death house swearing that he was innocent of the killing of a 15-year-old girl. The circumstantial evidence against him was very strong.
You can watch the full interview in the description below, for this is just one part of two and only the very beginning of that interview. Later in 1976, he would be charged for kidnapping and attempted murder of Lefteria Osborne, for which he would spend the rest of his life in the California Medical Facility in Vacaville, California. He would not be able to go for another parole date until the age of 90. However, he passed away on March 20th, 2017 at age 83 in prison. However, this was not announced in public until September 25 of 2017. He was hailed a celebrity, the police were very disappointed, and he conned William Buckley. But now, he's dead. Alright, so I'm just embracing myself in the wind right now, but it is pretty interesting about the story of Edgar Smith. So, I really hope you enjoy this interesting video. It's almost like even a documentary, but it's basically just history. Anyways, guys, I really hope you enjoyed this episode, and I hope you really learned something today, that even after 50, 60 years, you can still learn a lot about your own town. Anyways, my name is Tom Furman, and I'll see you guys later. Enjoy the next video.